Hi everyone, we're ready to get started now. So today we're going to be discussing our third part of our webinar series about cloud migrations. Today we're going to be discussing the planning, execution, and best practices for moving to the iManage Cloud DMS. Today we're focusing on an eDOCS open text migration for Baker McKenzie. They're going to discuss their experience with that, but the principles here will be applicable for all cloud migrations. So I'm going to jump into the webinar here, and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves as we're going to have two different speakers today. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you, John. Hi there, everyone. Today we want to talk about the fastest and least disruptive route to the cloud, as John mentioned, based upon the move for Baker McKenzie from OpenText to iManage. Before we begin, of course, just to mention that the recording will be available at the end of this, and we'll make sure that's available for everybody who's taken part and others as well. If you've got some questions, feel free to submit them at any time via the Q&A capabilities of the webinar, and we'll be sure to try to do our best to answer those questions at the end of the presentation. Would also really appreciate if you'd go ahead and complete the survey once we are completed with the once we've finished up the webinar. Just be really helpful so that we can make sure we're continuing to do a good job into the future in how we present to you. My name is Howard Russell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of RBRO Solutions. Been at this for a very, very, very long time. And for me, it's all about ensuring that things are simple, straightforward, understandable, accessible to our clients, to the users within your organizations. I've been doing the technology thing for a long time, both on the development side, but as well significantly on the consulting side. And I've worked with clients from law firms to banks to corporate legal departments, as well as accounting and other types of organizations as well. So we continue to just push hard in this space. Hopefully we can offer up some good information for you today. And I'll let Brad introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Ledsinger from Baker McKenzie. So I've been doing the document management side of things for about 20 years now. I think the first DMS that I supported was eDOCS Open 3.8.2, if anyone remembers that version. It was quite some time ago. Currently, I am the portfolio manager for document management, which basically means I'm in charge of the DMS for the entire firm, and I'm also the technical lead for the iManage project.
Right on. Thank you very much, Brad. So we're going to talk about a few things. We've already done the introduction. I think everyone knows who RBRO Solutions is. And you've met Brad and myself. We're going to talk a little bit about why iManage, get Brad to give a bit of insight into that for Baker McKenzie. We'll talk about some of the challenges and expectations of a project like this, and then we'll start walking you through what does it mean to get ready for this? What is the eDOCS specific preparation in this case, and what about that might apply to other migrations? And then, of course, what does that migration process look like? And then, of course, we'll get into the wrap up. So Brad, obviously Baker McKenzie made a decision to go with iManage. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done all that fun work that we did together with our teams. But you know, why? Why iManage? What made Baker McKenzie decide that was their choice?
Yeah, so we started off the process with actually it was about 80 to 100 different line items of, you know, what each of the different DMSs, you know, there's only about 4 or 5 out there that are enterprise level enough to handle a Baker McKenzie. So we made this massive Excel spreadsheet with, you know, a bunch of different points and everything like that. But to be fair, really, it boiled down to 2 things. One, iManage we consider to be the industry leader when it came to the document management systems that were available. And it was also pretty much the only enterprise level solution that you could do both on cloud or in the cloud and on-prem. So we have several offices that have to be on-prem. They can never be in the cloud due to data privacy issues. And so for us, it was a deal breaker if another DMS did not offer that on-prem and cloud solution.
That makes sense. Thanks, Brad. So as we continue through that process, you decided iManage was the solution that you wanted to work with, but then as you got into the project, you also had to figure out what it was that you wanted to process through, what was going to be the most important challenges. You had to think about the partner, how you're going to work with us. You had to think about your user expectations. It's a pretty big firm, just a few people at Baker McKenzie, and so there's some things for you to factor in there. Maybe if you can share a little bit, just expand a little bit on some of the challenges and that you saw, some of the expectations, and how you managed all of that.
Sure. So, number one challenge for us is just the size of the firm in and of itself. So, we have over 100 libraries, eDOCS libraries globally. We have about 250 eDOCS DM servers globally, and it's just a massive system, and it's just a bear to try to deal with. So we definitely had to take that into consideration. We also had a really short time frame to work with. We wanted to be really fast in getting to iManage, at least for the initial office, and then have about a 2-year period of getting all the other 79 offices onto the new system. We also had the requirement that we didn't want to end up with a ton of iManage libraries. So we wanted to have as few iManage libraries as possible because we really wanted one main thing, and that's global collaboration. So this is something that I have been asked about pretty much since my first day at Baker. How can I collaborate globally with someone from across the globe? And to do that, you really want as few repositories as possible. So then we had to figure out, all right, well, what do we need to do as far as, getting there? So we knew that from the iManage side of things that, getting to the cloud was going to take some third parties. And so that's where RBRO came into play. So we really wanted someone with strong knowledge. So we'd never done an eDOCS to iManage migration before, obviously. So we needed someone that had done, hundreds of them. We wanted someone that was highly recommended, solid plan. We needed something that was going to work for our type of migration. And so because of those, we had to meet and manage the user's expectations. So because we have so many offices, we couldn't have multiple downtimes. And so let's take, for example, Europe. Let's assume that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of like 35 different offices there. So if we did, groups of 5 offices at a time, that would be 7 different migration events. So on the last one, you'd be shutting down the DMS for 30 offices for a weekend, and that's not something the business was willing to do. So we had to figure out a way of migrating into the cloud, but having it in such a way that we didn't have any downtime.
One of the things that when we talk about moving from iManage to OpenText, there was from OpenText to iManage. We've talked to firms where the end users were very dissatisfied on go live day. They would ask, where is this particular item, or why is it that I can't find things this way, and where's my search dialog? And they expected things to look just like OpenText when they got into iManage. It had been communicated up front. Is that something that you had to manage there, and how did that work out?
Yeah, we did a little bit. So at least on the project side of things, the expectation was that we were not going to make an eDOCS system into iManage, or maybe a better way of putting that is iManage is an iManage system and eDOCS is eDOCS. So you're not trying to recreate one into the other. It just doesn't work. If you go, into it with that attitude, then you're probably not going to get the best result possible. But we had a lot of user interaction when we were going into Belgium. So we had lots of meetings with the user base to make sure that they understood that, we weren't just replacing eDOCS. We were giving them something completely new, and that it was just going to be a better way of working, period. But that's some adjustments were going to have to be made.
Mm. So then once you kind of you work through those expectations, you figure out what you need to do on a big level. Now you've got to get into it and you've got to prepare for the actual movement to iManage. And we think about it from the perspective of good design. As a vendor, but also as a client, I think reasonable timeframes are very, very important. You don't want this thing to drag on forever. You've got lots of other projects to do. And so having good design in a reasonable time frame is important. We also like to keep it simple. As soon as it gets complicated, it's no fun. And so that's one of the things that we tend to push towards. And we know as an organization, many of our customers, yourselves included, have been on that page of, we don't want too many crazy integrations. Talk a little bit about what getting ready looks like for Baker McKenzie, and what some of that process was for you and what things fed into that to allow you to have a successful project.
So first start off with the design phase. So, and the main part of the design is, of course, the workspace templates. So we didn't want to go into or get ourselves into a position where we were in that decision-making mode for too long of a time. So we only spent about 4 weeks on the template design. We had our each practice group assigned one person to help us design these things, and we ended up with 14 templates, one for each practice group, and then one generic one. And that was really key to not spend months and months and months and have hundreds of people, which has happened in other projects here, have a say-so in those types of things. I mean, we can adjust these things later. So we just want to make them very simple. The templates are small, and go from there.
Now, isn't feedback the breakfast of champions, though? Wouldn't you want feedback from as many people as possible?
No. Because that could actually, if let's say that every office wanted to assign 2 or 3 people, or one from every practice group, which would be 10 people. So now you're talking 800 people. And that just doesn't work. You'll never come to a consensus if you have that many chefs in the kitchen. So we had to really be very laser focused on who we were getting feedback from, and really wanted to make sure that we were getting the people that could make the decisions, making the decisions, and then that was it.
So what's this about the 80-20 rule then?
So the 80-20 rule is basically you can't make everybody happy all the time. So, if you can make about 80% of the people happy, then you're doing great. So that there were some different settings and things that come along with iManage that are very similar to what's in eDOCS. Like, when you drag and drop an email or something like that, if it's a move versus a copy. So we had to take, the approach that this is a global design, and if we can, make 80% of the people happy, then that's the choice that we needed to make.
That makes sense.
And not have a bunch of different configurations to go along with that. We have one configuration for the entire firm.
Must make life a little easier from a troubleshooting perspective. So then you had this question about open text folders and migrating them into the environment. We've seen some environments where folks have wanted to migrate them, and we've been in environments where folks have not wanted to migrate them. Why not?
Yeah, so eDOCS folders really don't equate very well to iManage folders. There's in eDOCS, a folder can be in multiple different places. It can have the same document in it multiple times. It can have one document in several folders at the same time. And so in the iManage world, that really doesn't work. And we really wanted a clean slate too. We've had the eDOCS system here for about 20 years. And so that's a lot of legacy data that really doesn't apply very much. So we wanted a clean system, and migrating the folders just didn't make sense for us.
Makes sense. Now, global design, I think you got completed in about 12 weeks. The migration planning, that went fairly quickly. Just took about 6 weeks to get all that done. Talk about how you felt maybe going through that migration process a little bit.
Sure. So we start out with only migrating one office, which was the Belgium office, and had about 1.6 million documents. And so this is where we engaged with RBRO, and we installed the eDOCS to iManage module and just got it going. It was actually a pretty simplistic and a very straightforward and clean process. We had basically no issues after the go live with any of the migrated data. It was really good.
Right on. So just switching maybe a little bit modes, we'll talk about for everybody how we went through this process and some of the things that we had to consider as we work through it. Obviously, as you're preparing to migrate content from one system to another, really important piece of that is to know your data. It's one of the mantras that we have at RBRO here, and that is you need to understand everything that's going on in the environment. The more you know upfront, the more details you have about that content, about the expectations of your users around that content, the better your chances are of having an accelerated migration. And I think, the big key here is you don't want to spend a lot of time doing this. You want it to be quick, you want it to be relatively painless, and you want to have people feel good at the end of it, knowing that they got what they expected to get in terms of data. So know your data is very important. So versions was one of the things that we had to talk about and deal with. eDOCS has this idea of subversions, and iManage doesn't. iManage uses a straight, version, next version type organization of the content. And so we had to translate information from eDOCS subversions and eDOCS versions into iManage versions. But to avoid problems during the scope of the migration, we needed to get that turned off right up front. So for those of you that have eDOCS, I think you have a good sense of what we're talking about there. Then we went into had to take a look at the preview files, and in eDOCS, it has the ability to generate small previews of existing documents within the environment. Obviously, your previews can essentially double the number of documents that you've got within the system in terms of physical documents. And so we don't want to migrate those previews because they are redundant content. And so we had to identify those preview documents and make sure that they were eliminated. You guys did it a little bit differently. In some instances, for some customers, we will go ahead and do that filtering as part of the migration. I think you guys decided to just get rid of them up front.
Yeah, we sure did. So we don't have, so the previewer was turned on many years ago and subsequently turned off. It really didn't do what we needed it to do. There was some issues with it. But there was, go ahead.
No, that's all right. You go right ahead.
Yeah, so they weren't being used by anyone. So yeah, we just went ahead and just deleted them from all systems.
Made life a little easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we've got security requirements. You know, as one of the lead support individuals back in the day for OpenText, when you were working there, you had to deal with a lot of interesting things supporting that product. And you also have really strong, which of course helped our project, really strong understanding of all the inner workings of that solution. One of the things that, of course, we had to deal with was the fact that eDOCS security and iManage security is a little different. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So yeah, eDOCS security is complicated. I don't know how many different combinations there are for eDOCS security, but I don't know, it's probably in the thousands. You can go from having no rights to just view the profile rights to read only to so on and so on and so on. And then, a combination therein. Then you have deny rights as well. So, we work with RBRO on basically creating a mapping table so that we knew that, if it had this value in eDOCS, it mapped to this value in iManage. And it actually worked out really well. We also flattened the security groups. So in eDOCS, the groups that are there currently are just in eDOCS. They don't really belong to anything. So we made the decision to just flatten them out, put them in iManage, and then create the security groups from there.
And by flatten, what you mean is you removed the users from the groups and added the users directly to the ACLs in order to avoid bringing those security groups over.
That's correct.
One of the interesting things about that, the nuance of the security levels that you're talking about there as well, is, in eDOCS, for example, you might have view profile, but not view document rights. In iManage, it's just view, and view means you can view the profile and the document, but not modify. And so we have to make those kinds of determinations and all that kind of stuff. You really want to do up front, make sure you have a good understanding of things, so that as the migration process is happening, things just move along smoothly. Document types and applications was another thing we had to think about. In eDOCS, applications are associated with the eDOCS profile, but there are many versions of a document. Each one of those versions don't necessarily have their own assignment of an application to them. And so we had to go through the process of looking at the document extensions and applying document types in iManage based upon the extensions of the documents in eDOCS, rather than based upon the application that was assigned. So just a little bit of a switch in thinking about that type of information as it went through. Similar things with document types in eDOCS, which for those of you in the iManage world, document type or just type often means the format of the document, i.e. Word versus PowerPoint and so on. Document types in eDOCS would be more analogous to the document class in iManage, so an agreement versus pleading and so on. So we had to do that mapping exercise as well. All of that was done, of course, within the application, so that it would be something that would, once done, would just continue to flow for subsequent updates. We also had some interesting metadata requirements that we had to walk through. The information that was managed within eDOCS had particular client matter information on. I think, Brad, you guys had some office matters that had interesting structures that had to change. Maybe talk a little bit about the things that we had to think about there.
Yeah, sure. So this was, well, there was a couple of different things here. So number one, we had some clients and matters that were office level clients and matters. So they weren't in our billing system, but they'd been made by the office themselves, that started with a pound symbol. And iManage hates that pound symbol. So we removed all pound symbols from the beginning of all clients and matters. We also have larger client and matter ID and name fields that is standard in eDOCS. And so we did actually have to do some data manipulation there to make sure that it fit inside of the client and matter tables inside of iManage. But this was stuff that we knew about early on, and we just handled it. I mean, one of the other things that we did that really helped out is we went through this eDOCS library and fixed a lot of the data pre-migration. So for example, we went through and fixed all the emails that maybe didn't have the to, from, CC, BCC filled out inside the database. We had clients and matters that didn't have a description, so we added a description. We had documents that didn't have a client or matter assigned to it, so we assigned every document a client matter. Same with document types. We had, for some unknown reason, a few documents that didn't have an author, and so we assigned, indexer to those documents and things like that. So there was some pre-work that we did on our side just to make sure that the migrator didn't have to handle those types of situations too terribly often.
I think the big picture on this slide is the know your data piece. To the degree that we can remediate ahead of time before we even start the migration, yes, there's definitely error handling capabilities within migration solutions out there on the market, but no error handling solution knows the intent of the person who profiled a document or did something that may be a little bit off the beaten path. And so it's really important that we understand the intentionality of the data and make sure that we've targeted things appropriately. I want to talk a little bit about the process. Obviously, we were talking about accelerating, and we want to be able to move as quickly as we can to the cloud. Fortunately, 5-week, 6-week process is very quick for a migration. Typically, we were able to do that start to finish with the Baker migration because we had a great team to work with on both sides, but also because we had a process that would work. So first of all, we started with extract, and that is using the utility to pull information from the active libraries and using that tool to be able to continue to draw ongoing deltas which is changes that users make from those active libraries on an ongoing basis during the life of the migration, so that we can continue to keep the destination or the cloud library up to date. That simplified process, though, didn't do any processing or updating or transformation of the data. It was just about pulling into our tables the information from those libraries so that we could go ahead and begin to manipulate it without having to impact, from a performance perspective, the content in the existing libraries. From there, we moved into transformation, and the transform, there's a bunch of steps there, but we had to take into consideration what Brad mentioned. Over 100 libraries moving into less than 10. Obviously, the document numbers are going to have collisions from all of those libraries as they come together in their various groupings, regional groupings, and so on. And so we had to think about renumbering of those documents, and renumbering meant dealing with the document number, but it also meant dealing with the version information. OpenText, of course, having subversions that are based on letters as opposed to numbers, and iManage having number-based versions that are sequential. And so that had to be factored in. And then of course you have to keep track of it. And it doesn't help when you have millions and millions and millions of documents to think about whatever these numbers are, being able to manage them and track them so that we don't end up in a situation where the document numbers that we're generating for the content coming into OpenText overruns the document numbers that were made available to us, and that maybe our documents run into workspaces which also use document numbers that have been generated in the system. So that was a really important thing, I think, Brad, for us to work through. We also had to deal with users and groups, clients and matters. Brad talked about some of that special mapping that we did. Again, much of this is possible we wanted to do upfront so that we wouldn't be in a situation where we had to figure it out as we were going, or we would be in a situation where after the fact we realized that there was some data that just wouldn't come into the system, it hadn't been processed. And so being able to understand what do those special mappings look like, what do the flattened ACLs look like, and what do the applications look like as we're transforming the data was something that was important. Also, the content coming from OpenText, because that content was coming from either having folders, and I think, Brad, you had mentioned that some of the libraries in your environment used folders extensively, and other libraries maybe didn't use folders at all. And so it was really important to have a consistent methodology that would articulate how that content came from the OpenText libraries into iManage. And that methodology, even though we were doing just one initial library, had to be a methodology that could be applied over the next several months to all libraries across the organization. And so client, matter, document, class were used as a way to map that content into the folders of those workspaces. And of course, to be able to use a folder such as a to be filed folder for outliers where content would come into a matter but didn't necessarily match up with the default class of the folders that existed within that matter. Any more comments on that one, Brad?
No, that's exactly right. So yep, we took the document type in eDOCS and mapped it to the document class, which were on the folders for the templates, and imported into those. And yeah, then we had the to be filed, which was kind of the catch-all folder, where quite a bit of content ended up. But the users really they didn't mind that. They just go into to be filed. They can search on that folder and find what they need, and then move it if they want to afterwards.
Now, you didn't bring everything over, though, as part of this transformation. Obviously, history is something that typically firms want us to bring. You guys did something a little bit different there.
We did. So eDOCS typically doesn't like it if your activity log table gets above a certain size. And so we actually have a process here where we take the history after 90 days and archive it into another table to keep eDOCS performing as well as it can. So because of this, and because the users are used to only seeing 90 days of history, I made the executive decision to only migrate in 90 days of the history into iManage as well. And then we've just piped in all that history into a couple of SQL databases. So if we do need to find the history of a particular document for whatever reason, we can do so. But in iManage, we really didn't feel like it really added that much value.
when we started migrating the data to the cloud, we migrated directly from, in this particular instance, directly from your systems to the cloud, as opposed to using a staged migration in which we migrate initially to an on-prem environment, and then we, ship or SFTP or use AZ copy or something like that, where we would ship the documents and the migrated database to the iManage cloud for merging into the cloud. Talk a little bit about why you chose to go the direct route.
Right. So, I touched on this earlier, but basically it had to do with just how many migration events that we're going to have to do to get all the offices from eDOCS to iManage. And because of that, it's impossible to go big bang here. Not enough trainers in the world to handle it. So we needed to be able to do a migration and to have a go live, but not shut down offices that had previously gone live. So going directly into the cloud and not having to do a bulk import into the cloud where you have to kind of take it offline to do that was the only choice for us.
I think one of the things for us that was really important to support you in that was to make sure that we had the ability to throttle. So having that ability to tune how many documents per hour would be going to the cloud, so that when users are on the cloud and using it, we might still want to be trickling documents in, but maybe we don't want to be slamming those documents in, at 80,000 documents an hour. We might want to pull that back a little bit. And so we had that ability to tune, and that's something that's going to be able to help as we go forward to manage the fact that users are on the system, with the fact that we also are looking to onboard new offices into the system at the same time. So having the ability to do that.
I said, our network team really appreciated that, by the way, because we could have put it to a point where we very well might have taken the data center down because the tool is really fast.
Absolutely. So firm expectations, data use cases, and things like that we wanted to factor in, and you've talked about that with the security, with the use of the office, the office codes and translating those. All that was taken into account as part of the load operations. Then after all that's done, so we've done the extract, the transform, and then the load, and of course then the remediation comes in, and we have to look and ask ourselves, how did things go? And I'd say we had minimal remediation to do. There were a couple of things that we had to do there, but we didn't have a lot to do because we did a lot of that work up front. And then of course we had some targeted reprocessing of some relevant items to do, but by and large, data predictability was something we really tried to enforce on our process, which meant our data remediation in your case was fairly small.
Yeah, we pretty much got it right the first time. I mean, as far as the documents and where they went and the security and things like that, we had, I would say, really it's zero remediations. The one thing that I think we did quite a number of times, and it was really just more of a me thing than anything else, was we did put a lot of data into the comments of the documents, like the folder crumb trails and the library that it used to exist in, and the old document number and things like that. And I think we did that maybe 4 or 5 times before I was finally satisfied with how it looked. But that was more of a, like I said, a me thing than anything else thing.
Right on. But I think the ability to do that through these things up front is really important. But again, that whole acceleration piece is, to the degree that we can plan those things, organize them well, it saves you a lot of time trying to poke into the cloud after the fact to try to figure out what went wrong.
Absolutely.
So the next thing that we have after that then is we move beyond those ones, is we moved into the idea of disruption of your users. And I think we talked probably enough about that, but the idea that the initial migration needed to go really, really well. You beat that into my brain over and over and over through the life of this project. That this needed to go well. It absolutely had to be perfect because the rest of the firm needed to be confident that we would be able to move the thousands of users across the world into the system without a lot of disruption of their work. And so that was something that we tried to build into our process. You feel like that went well?
Oh yeah. So yeah, the feedback that we got from Brussels was really positive. So you know, most of the issues that we had after the go live were really just training issues. We did have a couple of issues with one with the index and one with a bug in iManage, but other than that, yeah, it was basically everyone was super happy, and the firm is very excited to be the next office. We have offices now fighting over, you know, who's next to get on board. So it's really a cool thing.
Right on. That's what you want to have. I will say that working with the iManage team on this project was also really good in terms of their ability to quickly respond to challenges that we might have faced with performance or other things, and that went really, really well for us. Testing, and then some more testing, I think, is really important. Imagination is key. Sometimes we look at the screen and we say to ourselves, everything looks well, and so we move forward. But really testing based upon what an end user might experience, I think was a really important piece as well, to make sure that we understood that we were going to have a successful go live.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that we probably could have done better is we typically tested, so we have a QA department, so they did their testing, but they did it as QA users. Of course, the DM team, we did a bunch of testing, but we did it with our accounts. We did have users test, but we should have had more than what we did. And so, you know, real users coming in with their real accounts, looking at, you know, as close to the real system as possible to make sure that what they see is what they expect. So, yep, testing. Can't state that enough.
Right on. So as we kind of get into the wrap up and summary of some of the things that we were talking about, I think there's probably some key points that we want to reiterate here. First of all, surprises slow you down. If you have surprises coming up, you're going to have to take time to figure out what that was about, where it came from, how do you communicate about it to the firm, what's the expectations of folks around that thing, and everything stops while you sort that thing out. Your data knowledge, if you have good data knowledge, it's going to really allow you to be able to respond to users. You'll be able to say to users, this is why the data looks this way. This is why the data is here and not there. And that's, of course, going to drive up confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spent a lot of time with the Brussels users to make sure that they were very comfortable with the go live. We and then after the go live, we had a number of people on site to make sure that it was absolutely a success too. So that also helped.
In terms of the decision-making side of things, quick is good, rushed is bad. We never want rushed decisions. We want them to be well considered. But if you have quick and effective decisions, you set a really, really solid foundation for your migration, and those decisions help you to have a predictable path. And I think one of the things that was really powerful about this particular experience for me as a consultant working with a client, and for our team working with you, uh, was that the willingness of your firm to empower you to be able to be a decision maker and to accelerate things. We've certainly been in situations where it is death by committee, if you will. There's lots and lots and lots of folks involved in decision making, and lots of interests and all those neat things that come along with it, which can be good sometimes, but oftentimes just serve to delay what is an inevitable decision and slow down your overall project timelines and the effectiveness of your project.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. So that was one thing that we really wanted to make sure happened with this project is, you know, the people, myself included, that have to make these decisions. Really, we make the decision and we just let people know what that decision was. And there's really no questioning that decision unless it's something that's just completely bonkers, which really didn't happen. So yeah, it was very quick, you know, hours to make a decision, not days, not weeks, was really important to us.
And the fact that there are so many little decisions throughout the life of the project, or even in, within a given day, where there's a lot of different things, moving parts in the migration that require decisions that needed to be made and need to be made quickly. I think having that unified decision making just allowed us to be able to navigate those things in a very smooth and effective way. Don't
Absolutely.
overcomplicate it is another thing that that we talked about. There's lots of alternative paths. We've been in migration situations where there is, the documents will go here in this case, but not in that case. But if these two cases happen, then they should go here instead, and so on and so on and so on. And we have endless rules for how the data is going to be moved or how the metadata is going to be adjusted on it, and tracking those and tracking potential conflicts between those rules have in some of those cases become a nightmare. We didn't do that this time.
No, and if you're ever in that situation where you're trying to figure out the absolute perfect place for every single document, you might want to take a look at how much content in a DMS is actually ever looked at again after it's initially saved. It's actually probably less than you think it is. In our situation, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60 to 70% of the content is only ever looked at once. So it's again kind of back to that 80-20 rule. If you can have a good choice 80% of the time of where these documents are going to end up in iManage, then chances are that's going to really work for the end users as well.
Right on. And then the last thing, flexibility. Flexibility is incredibly important, I think, for the client to have flexibility, knowing that there's lots of interesting things that are thrown in our direction, and also for us as partners to have flexibility. We have to be prepared to move quickly in support of user needs when they come up. And sometimes the unfortunate truth is they come up at the last moment, and other times they might come up early and you just realize you've got to change your path a little bit. But flexibility, as you look at the data, as you look at the content, you look at the process, is really, really important. The process serves us, we don't serve the process, and so that flexibility is there to make sure we can deliver value.
Yeah, that actually kind of reminds me of a story. So, for the go live, I went to Brussels the week beforehand and the week afters. And on, I think, the Wednesday or Thursday before the go live, I was talking to one of the partners, and he was like, "Oh, so I've been saving to this other library for the last 6 months. Is that data gonna be in iManage?" And we're like, "No, because well, that's not what we've been migrating." And so immediately I call up Howard and like, "Hey, we got the situation here where this one guy is gonna really be in a bad place come Monday. Can we take his certain situation and rectify it?" And sure enough, we were able to do that. So that was one of those things where it was last minute, and we even set the guy's expectations where we really didn't know if we were going to be able to have his content available day one, but it was, and so that was really good.
Yeah, it's really important, that flexibility, and I'm glad we were able to help out with that. But the big picture of all of this is, again, know what you're doing, know the data you're working with, make decisions quickly, but make them effective. Keep it simple, and if you keep it simple, you'll be able to offer that flexibility to your users, and from our perspective to our clients, much more effectively, because we don't have an overly complex situation to work with. And I think if you're trying to move fast, these are the things that are going to help you to move fast as you're moving from an on-premise open text environment, an on-premise file system environment, some other document management system, or structure of data to the iManage cloud. If you keep some of these things on your mind, you're going to accelerate your project for sure. Folks, that's it for the things that we wanted to share with you. We're happy to take any questions that you've got about the OpenText project for Baker McKenzie to iManage, and or anything from myself as well.
Okay, we've got a few questions in there so far. One of them was, does RBRO have a migration tool for iManage on-prem to iManage cloud? So not quite the scope of what we're discussing today, but still a valid question.
Sure, absolutely, we do, and we can take your iManage libraries from on-prem to the cloud directly. If you've got multiple libraries that you want to consolidate as part of that activity, as part of that move to the cloud, we can do that as well. So sure, just reach out to our sales team, and they can help you get connected with that and with services if you need that to help you do that as well.
Okay. The next one was, did the scope include major changes to the template for eDOCS?
Right.
Well, so I'm not exactly sure what's being asked. So eDOCS really doesn't have templates, but we do have our standard templates, and we might adjust them in the future when we have more offices online with iManage and we get more feedback. But yeah, for right now, they are set in stone.
Okay. Next one was, any advice for the go live weekend?
A little bit. So, we were there during the go live weekend, and a couple of things that we did was we actually made sure that all the computers were on in the office. We told everyone to leave their laptops in the office, although not everyone did. I know, not shocking on that one. Uh, we created some reports from eDOCS for the heavy folder users so that they could kind of see the structure that used to be in eDOCS, so that they could have something to kind of look at. We did several things that throughout the weekend just to make sure that everything went as smoothly as possible. We probably went a little overboard, but it all worked out in the end.
And I think from our perspective, the thing that we think is really, really important leading up to that go live weekend is you should have 99.9999% of your documents already in the system. The only thing that we should be synchronizing on that last day is that last day's documents. You don't want to go into the go live weekend having to figure out and do a lot of remediation work. You want to use that go live weekend to finalize those last few documents and then move on to the desktop installs, having some people do some good testing to make sure that your go live experience is going to be great for everyone, and then getting
Absolutely.
rest.
I think the last Delta migration that we did had somewhere in the neighborhood of like 600 documents. It took like 5 minutes. So yeah, that was definitely an important thing.
Okay. Next question was, did you do some testing with a pilot group before migrating the first office?
Yes. So we had user acceptance testing. We did 2 weeks of that. We also did QA. So we basically gave, so we have a development and a production environment for iManage in the cloud. So we did a migration into the into the dev environment. And we gave them access into that. And so that way they could edit documents, they could do whatever they wanted to. It wasn't being migrated into anymore. We just migrated into it once. We didn't do deltas or anything like that. And so that way they could get a flavor for how it was going to look and give us feedback. And really the feedback was, it looks good. So we really didn't have to make any adjustments from that. But yeah, we definitely did give the users a chance to look at the data and make sure that it was okay.
Okay, perfect. Next question is, I don't think related to eDOCS, but part of the cloud migration. Is co-authoring add-in part of the configuration? And if yes, any lessons learned?
It is not. So co-authoring requires Office 365, and we are not on that version of Office currently. It is something that we'll be looking at in the future, though.
Howard, is that a question generally?
Yeah, I think not generally. It's something that firms are looking at, and there's a lot of different opinions about whether or not folks want to do co-authoring. Certainly if you're talking to universities and those types of organizations, it's a big deal. In law firms, there's still a little bit of that. It's my document, and I kind of want to control the edits until I'm done mine, and then you can do yours, so that we know who's doing what. But co-authoring is definitely a thing, and I think it's probably going to increase in different ways as it gets more mature and it gets better. But definitely the Office 365 is something that factors into that. And I would say there's not a plethora of it out there yet today. So it's not something that would typically be, from a cloud migration perspective, the thing you're focused on. It's more of a feature type discussion about the iManage experience, just generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think some other questions generally about moving to the cloud, possibly from iManage on-prem. One of them is, are a lot of these issues mitigated if moving from iManage on-premise to cloud?
No, not really. So whether you're moving from iManage to the cloud, or you're moving from OpenText, as Baker McKenzie is doing, to the cloud, or from a Windows file system, that know your data thing applies to all of them. We've moved large numbers of iManage libraries to the cloud for many firms, and in most of these circumstances, there's something in the data that's not quite right. Maybe a consultant years ago inserted some documents into iManage through using SQL rather than using the APIs, and forgot to truncate the spaces on the end of the author user ID. These types of things exist in iManage environments, and of course we've got to remediate that as well as part of what we would call a lift and shift to the iManage cloud. So data challenges exist whether you're moving on-premise iManage data to the cloud or whether you're migrating from another system. In Windows file systems, there's corrupt file dates that you have to deal with. There are the fact that users have the document in one folder today and another folder tomorrow. There's lots of issues. The issues, of course, are varied and different from environment to environment. In the case of OpenText, we've built a process specifically to facilitate OpenText and the nuances thereof. In the case of iManage, we've built a process to facilitate iManage and the nuances thereof. And then, of course, we have generic migration capabilities around file systems and those other things as well.
Okay, perfect. One more question to think about moving to the iManage cloud. Can you move to the cloud but keep your clients on, it says 9.6. I think it would refer to classic clients or whatever client they're currently using today.
Yes, you can. The classic client today does provide the ability to speak to the Work10 backend. In many cases, firms who are in an on-premise environment have the classic client deployed, and they've upgraded their backend to Work10, which is similar to what they would experience if they were in the cloud in terms of the versioning of the software. So it's absolutely possible to do that. We would tend to recommend that you have a plan to move towards full Work10 so that you can begin to take advantage of the continuous deployment capabilities and all the other neat things that iManage is bringing and offering as a service through that platform. But for comfort's sake, many firms want to get their documents and content into the cloud and without disrupting the user's day-to-day experience, and then they want to have time to deploy to a small group of users and work out exactly how they want that experience to be for their firm before they do a wide deployment. iManage offers you a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Okay, I think that is all the time we have for questions now. Any last thoughts before we wrap up for today?
No, other than to say thank you all very much for attending. Hopefully this was educational and helpful as you plan your move to the iManage cloud. And we're happy to help out in any way that we can, and to answer any questions that you might have in the future. Just go ahead and email us, and we'll do our best to respond to that.
Just one note, this was part 3 of a 3-part webinar series on moving to the cloud. If you've missed any of those previous parts, you can go to rbrosolutions.com/webinars, and we'll also be posting future webinars there as well. So thanks a lot for attending, everybody. We'll be sending out a copy of this webinar shortly. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Thanks again, everyone.